I never intended to set foot on Raven Hill. If the storm hadn't pinned me down, if the road hadn't turned to soup under my tires, maybe I would have found another way. But that night, the sky cracked open like a broken egg, and the rain came down so hard, it was like driving through a waterfall. Somewhere along that back road, my wheels hit a patch of mud, spun wildly, and refused to budge another inch. No signal on my phone, no passing cars, just the endless drumming of rain and the deep, creeping cold leaking through the windows. For a long moment, I just sat there behind the wheel, the engine ticking uselessly, watching the wipers struggle against the torrent. My headlights barely cut through the blackness, illuminating only the churned-up road ahead and a tangle of trees that looked more like grasping fingers than anything natural. And then, in a flash of lightning, I saw it, high on the hill, a silhouette against the storm, the sagging outline of a house that didn't belong to the living. Locals had whispered about Raven Hill for years, about the Barrett family who once lived there. Some said they simply disappeared one winter night, leaving their supper half-eaten on the table. Others spoke of things worse than death: curses, hauntings, restless spirits. I had laughed at those stories before. Not tonight. Another flash of lightning lit up the world, and the house came into focus again. It loomed like a corpse, unwilling to be buried, its windows like dark, sunken eyes staring straight at me. The rain showed no mercy. If I stayed in the car, I'd freeze by morning, or worse, never be found at all. Shoving the door open against the wind, I stumbled out, pulling my jacket tight against the cold. The mud sucked greedily at my boots as I trudged uphill, each step a battle. The closer I got, the more the house seemed to lean toward me, as if recognizing my approach, as if waiting. Water streamed down my face, and I wiped it away, squinting against the darkness. The house creaked under the assault of the storm, a low groaning sound that might have been wood, or something breathing. The porch was a splintered wreck, but I climbed the steps anyway, heart pounding in my ears. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to get back in my car, to wait for anything else, anyone else. But the night was heavy, and the cold gnawed at my bones. I had no real choice. Shelter was shelter, even if it came wrapped in a nightmare. The front door stood half ajar, moving slightly with the wind, the hinges groaning with each slow sway. For a second, I hesitated on the threshold, drenched and shivering, staring into the gaping darkness beyond. It smelled of rot and mold, a heavy, choking scent that pressed against me like a hand. Another roll of thunder shook the world, and I stepped inside. The door moaned as it drifted shut behind me. In the suffocating silence that followed, I realized my mistake. The house had swallowed me whole, and it wasn't planning to let go. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew I had made a mistake. The air inside was thick and heavy, stale like the breath of something ancient and long dead. The door creaked closed behind me with a reluctant groan, sealing me into the darkness. For a few seconds, I just stood there in the entryway, soaked to the bone, every instinct inside me screaming to turn around and leave. But outside was the storm, howling and merciless. In here, at least for now, there was a roof over my head. I pulled out my phone, hoping for a little light, but the screen was dead. No signal, no power. Only the occasional flash of lightning from outside gave me brief glimpses of my surroundings. The entrance hall stretched out before me like the throat of some great beast. A crumbling grand staircase arched up into darkness at the far end, its balustrade warped and splintered. Torn and peeling floral wallpaper clung stubbornly to the walls, the once cheerful patterns now stained and sagging. Water dripped steadily from a crack in the ceiling, landing in a puddle with rhythmic plops that echoed down the hall, filling the silence. I moved forward slowly, each step across the warped floorboards sending hollow, groaning sounds into the gloom. It was so quiet otherwise that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, louder than the rain hammering the roof. I thought I heard something else too, a faint, almost imperceptible whispering. But when I stopped and strained my ears, there was nothing but the storm. The house felt alive. Not in the way old buildings sometimes seem to breathe with the shifting of wood and stone. No, this was different. The very walls seemed to watch me, to listen to me. Every shuddering breath and cautious footfall recorded in whatever memory the house kept of the living. Lightning flashed again, illuminating a broken chandelier that swung ever so slightly overhead, casting long, twitching shadows across the hall. For a moment, I thought I saw something move at the top of the stairs. A shape, small and fleeting, like a trick of the light. I blinked hard and shook it off. Just the storm playing with my eyes. Just nerves. I pressed deeper inside, past an old, moth-eaten sitting room where furniture lay toppled and ruined. Books with swollen, moldy pages lay scattered across the floor, their titles long since blurred away by damp and time. A child's tricycle, rusted and broken, sat abandoned in the corner, one wheel spinning slowly as if disturbed by an unseen hand. Another crack of thunder rattled the walls, and the floor beneath me trembled just enough to make me stumble. I caught myself on the banister, the wood slick and cold under my palm. Every instinct I had told me to leave, to run back into the storm and take my chances. But something deeper, something colder and heavier than fear, held me in place. A thump echoed above me, sharp, deliberate. I froze, breath caught in my throat. That wasn't the house settling. That wasn't the wind. It sounded too real, too heavy, like a footfall. I turned my head slowly, staring up the staircase that rose before me like a mouthful of broken teeth. Darkness swelled at the top, thick and swallowing. Somewhere beyond it, something moved again. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. My fingers tightened around the banister. I could still leave. I could still turn back before I saw something I couldn't unsee. But another part of me, the stubborn, reckless part that had gotten me into so much trouble over the years, whispered, "You've come this far. Might as well find out what's waiting." I drew in a shaky breath and started up the stairs. Each riser groaned beneath my weight, a slow, protesting sound that matched the racing beat of my heart. Halfway up, I paused, glancing back over my shoulder. The door still stood closed behind me, trapping me inside with whatever else lurked in the house. The upstairs landing loomed closer with every step, the shadows seeming to pull back just enough to reveal a narrow hallway stretching into deeper darkness. Somewhere ahead, a soft creak answered my arrival. I tightened my jaw and climbed the last few steps. The second floor awaited me like a lung full of dead air, and somewhere in the blackness, something was already aware of me. Already waiting. I should have turned back the moment the floor groaned under my boots like a wounded animal. Every instinct in my body told me I didn't belong there, that this house, abandoned or not, was not empty. But I kept moving, stubbornly convincing myself it was just the wind, the storm, the old bones of the house shifting with time. I wandered deeper into the lower floor, the cold seeping through my soaked clothes and gnawing at my skin. The air was different here, somehow heavier, as if each breath had to be dragged from the room. I passed a dining room where the table still stood, long and splintered, plates and silverware scattered across it like a meal interrupted. Cobwebs draped from the ceiling like tattered curtains, swaying gently, though there was no breeze. The further I moved from the front door, the louder the small sounds became. The faintest of whispers seemed to trail just behind me, soft and breathy, words I couldn't quite catch. I spun around once, twice, certain that someone was standing there, just out of sight. But the hallway remained empty, cloaked in shadows. I tried to laugh it off. Old houses settle, they shift and groan. It's normal, it's normal. But deep inside, a coiled, cold dread was beginning to take root, tightening in my gut with every step I took. I passed an old parlor, and in the corner, an upright piano sagged under years of dust. As I moved by, a single key pressed down with a brittle click, the sound slicing through the heavy silence. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the piano, willing it to stay still. It did, but the damage was done. My nerves were shredded thinner with every passing second. I told myself to leave. The storm couldn't be that bad. I could sleep in the car if I had to. But when I turned to retrace my steps, another sound cut through the house. A distinct, deliberate thump from upstairs, heavy enough to shake dust from the rafters. I froze, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure whatever was upstairs could hear it. That wasn't settling wood. That wasn't wind. That was something moving. I stood there, paralyzed in the dim light, the decision gnawing at me. Leave now, or find out what, or who, was in the house with me. Every logical thought screamed to get out. But against all reason, curiosity dug its claws into my spine, dragging me forward. Another thump, closer this time, followed by a low creak, like a door swinging open. I swallowed hard, the taste of metal sharp on my tongue. I wasn't alone. No amount of storm or desperation could change that fact anymore. A gust of icy air brushed the back of my neck, sudden and biting, and I shuddered violently. I whirled around, but the windows around me remained sealed tight. No cracks, no gaps for the storm to seep in. The cold hadn't come from outside, it had come from within. The house wasn't just abandoned. It was waiting, watching. And now, it knew I was here. My fists clenched at my sides, my mind scrambling for rational explanations even as fear burned hotter in my chest. Maybe it was squatters. Maybe animals had gotten inside. Maybe. Or maybe the Barretts had never truly left. Another rumble of thunder vibrated through the floorboards beneath my boots, shaking loose a flurry of dust from the ceiling. It settled around me like ash, like the house itself was slowly, patiently swallowing me whole. I drew in a shaky breath and set my sights on the staircase ahead. If I was going to survive this night, I had to know what was up there. Ignoring every screaming warning inside my head, I forced my feet to move. I was going upstairs, and whatever was waiting for me in the dark was already awake. The staircase groaned under my weight as I climbed, each step sounding out like a slow, mournful warning. My hand gripped the cracked banister so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I didn't stop. The house seemed to tighten around me the higher I went, the air growing colder, heavier, as if the darkness itself had substance, thick and smothering. Halfway up, I hesitated, glancing back toward the front door far below. It looked so small from here, so impossibly far away. I swallowed hard and forced myself to continue, foot by reluctant foot, up toward the unknown. When I reached the top landing, the storm outside crashed against the house with renewed fury, rattling the windows in their rotting frames. The hallway stretched out before me like the gullet of some ancient sleeping beast. The walls here were worse, peeling, water-stained, buckling under the weight of years. Doors lined each side, most hanging slightly ajar, the darkness behind them absolute. Except for one. At the very end of the hall, a single door stood slightly open, a sliver of pale light leaking out and slicing a path across the warped floorboards. The sight of it rooted me to the spot. Something about that faint light felt wrong, unnatural, like it didn't belong in this place, like it wasn't meant to be seen. The cold in the hallway deepened, numbing my hands and feet, sinking into my bones. I opened my mouth to call out, to announce myself like an idiot. But all that came out was a dry, cracking whisper. I tried again, louder this time. "Hello?" My voice broke the silence like a dropped plate, sharp and intrusive. It was immediately swallowed by the house. No answer, only the low, distant rumble of thunder, rolling across the hill like a growl. I stood there a long moment, heart pounding, every instinct I had screaming at me to turn back, to run, to leave whatever was behind that door alone. But fear had a strange hold on me now. Not just the urge to escape, but the gnawing, desperate need to know. I took a slow, careful step forward, then another, each creak of the floorboards like a gunshot in the suffocating silence. The closer I got, the more the air pressed down on me, thick and wet like trying to breathe through cloth. When I reached the door, I pressed my fingertips lightly against it. The wood was icy beneath my skin, almost vibrating with a low, humming tension. I pushed it open wider, just enough to peer inside. It was a child's bedroom. The pale light came from a cracked, dust-caked lamp on a nightstand, casting strange, shifting shadows across the room. The wallpaper was faded pink, patterned with rows of dancing bears, whose smiles had peeled into grotesque grins over the years. A small canopy bed sagged against the far wall, its sheets yellowed and shredded. For a moment, nothing moved. Just the slow drip of water from a corner of the ceiling, tapping rhythmically into a growing puddle on the warped wooden floor. And then, with a flash of lightning, I saw it. A small rocking horse in the corner of the room, painted white with faded blue flowers on its sides. It swayed gently back and forth, creaking in the silence. I froze, breath caught painfully in my chest. There was no draft, no reason for it to move. The house seemed to hold its breath with me, the storm's roar fading into the background until all I could hear was the slow, deliberate creak of the rocking horse. I took a step back, hand trembling as I reached for the door. And then, I heard it. A soft, high giggle, light and musical, coming from just behind me. Every hair on my body stood on end. Slowly, as if moving through water, I turned around. There, standing in the doorway, was a little girl. She wore a white nightgown that clung to her thin frame, soaked at the hem. Her hair hung limp and dark around her face, but it was her eyes, or the empty hollow spaces where her eyes should have been, that rooted me to the spot, paralyzed by a fear so deep it felt like my soul itself was shrinking away. She smiled at me, too wide, too many teeth, and lifted one small, delicate finger to her lips in a silent shh. And before I could scream, before I could even move, she faded into the darkness of the hall like smoke caught in a gust of wind. I staggered backward, tripping over the now still rocking horse, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might tear itself free from my chest. But the house was not done with me yet. From somewhere down the hall came the sound of footsteps. Light, quick, and getting closer. Fast. I scrambled to my feet, fumbling for the door, knowing that whatever was coming was not going to wait politely. I had crossed a line simply by coming here. And now, something had noticed. Something was coming. I stumbled back into the bedroom, heart battering against my ribs like a trapped bird, the cold breath of panic filling my lungs. The door swung half shut behind me, but my gaze was locked on the room, the horrible, frozen moment where everything seemed both dead and terribly, terribly alive. The rocking horse in the corner had stopped moving. It sat there, motionless now, as if it had never stirred, as if the creaking sway I'd witnessed was just some fevered trick of my mind. But I knew better. I knew what I had seen, what I had felt in the very marrow of my bones. Lightning split the sky again, flashing through the grimy window, and for a fraction of a second, the whole room lit up like a photograph. And in that strobe of white light, I swore I saw something. A figure, small, hunched, sitting atop the rocking horse, gone in an instant. The hair on the back of my neck prickled so fiercely it almost hurt. A sound behind me. A light musical giggle, soft as breath against my ear. I spun around, heart punching at my chest, and there she was again. The little girl, standing just inside the threshold, her bare feet silent on the warped wood. The nightgown clung wetly to her, translucent in places, and her hair, limp and stringy, framed a face that seemed more shadow than skin. Her smile was too wide, grotesque, splitting her face open like a wound. And her eyes, God, her eyes, hollow, black, endless. She lifted one pale finger to her lips again, signaling me to be quiet, a playful, childlike gesture that somehow carried the weight of a death sentence. My whole body locked up, frozen in a terror so pure and primal it felt ancient, buried deep in the blood of every living thing that knows when it's being hunted. The girl began to fade, dissolving into the darkness like smoke blown by a breeze, but the feeling of her lingered, heavy and clinging. The air crackled with it, thick and sharp like ozone after lightning. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the rocking horse again, my boot kicking it with enough force to set it rocking once more. It creaked horribly, each slow arc cutting through the suffocating silence like a knife. And then the footsteps started. Not the gentle shuffle of an old house, not the faint creaks I'd tried to dismiss before, but fast, deliberate pounding footsteps, rushing down the hall toward the bedroom. My mind screamed at me to move, but my body was a second too slow. The door, left swinging half open, jerked violently against the frame as something slammed into it from the other side. I lurched forward and slammed the door shut, fumbling desperately with the rusted old knob. My fingers, slick with sweat and rain, barely found purchase. The door rattled violently in its frame, shuddering under the weight of unseen fists, and a chorus of childish laughter erupted from beyond it, high, shrill, and wrong. It was like dozens of voices, layered atop one another, giggling and whispering and howling all at once. I threw my weight against the door, my heart a ragged drumbeat in my ears. I needed a way out. Now frantically, my eyes scanned the room. The window was too small, too high, barred by rusted iron grids. There had to be another way. And then I saw it. A narrow door tucked into the far corner, half hidden behind a rotting dresser. Smaller than the others. A servant's staircase, maybe. An escape hatch for someone like me. The bedroom door jolted again, the frame splintering slightly. A child's hand, small, pale, writhing, squeezed through the crack for just an instant before disappearing with a shriek of laughter. That was all the motivation I needed. I sprinted across the room, kicking aside broken toys and rotted debris. My hands fumbled for the tiny door, the knob sticky with grime, and wrenched it open. Beyond it, a staircase spiraled downward into blackness. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I plunged into the dark. The tiny door slamming shut behind me just as the bedroom door burst open and the sound of gleeful, rushing footsteps flooded into the space I had just abandoned. Down, down, down I went, into the suffocating, twisting black, chased by the sound of children's laughter that grew louder, closer, impossibly close. The house was awake now, and it wanted to play. The narrow staircase plunged into suffocating blackness, and my only guide was the slick, crumbling railing beneath my fingers and the frantic beat of my own heart. I could hear them behind me, the giggles, the soft patter of small feet, the doors slamming open in the distance. They weren't trying to hide anymore. They wanted me to hear them. I descended blindly, half running, half falling, scraping my shoulders against the narrow walls. The air was thick and sour, filled with the scent of mildew and something fouler underneath, something that made my stomach twist. I didn't dare slow down. Every second I stayed in that house felt like it was dragging me deeper into a place I wouldn't come back from. Somewhere above, a loud crack echoed through the house, like a door being torn off its hinges. The laughter spiked, shrill and wild, no longer innocent, no longer human. It chased me, nipping at my heels, a sound so wrong that it stripped away every rational thought, leaving only pure survival. My foot caught on a broken step and I stumbled, my shoulder slamming hard into the wall. Pain shot through me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I scrambled upright and kept moving, gasping for air that tasted like rot. As I rounded a bend in the stairs, lightning flashed again outside, and for a heartbeat, I saw it, at the top of the stairs, just beyond the small door I had escaped through. The girl. She stood perfectly still, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her soaked nightgown clinging to her bony frame. Her black, hollow eyes locked onto mine through the darkness. She lifted her hand again, slowly, deliberately, and pressed one finger to her cracked lips. Shh. The silent warning hit me harder than any scream could have. Because in that moment, I understood. It wasn't just noise they fed on. It wasn't just fear. It was attention, acknowledgement. Every step, every glance, every word pulled me deeper into their world, and I had already given them far too much. The girl smiled wider, impossibly wide, and took a step toward the narrow staircase. I turned and fled, barreling down the last few steps, the walls closing in tighter with each frantic heartbeat. The laughter above grew louder, multiplying, as if dozens more had joined her. Little feet thudded across the floorboards, doors banged open and slammed shut, and somewhere in the chaos, I heard the unmistakable sound of something dragging, something heavy being pulled toward the stairs. I didn't look back. I burst through a final door at the bottom of the staircase, tripping into a narrow, low-ceilinged hallway. The walls here were different, brick, cold, and slick with condensation. Old servants' quarters, maybe, forgotten and rotting beneath the house. I ran, half bent to avoid hitting my head, slipping on the wet stones underfoot. The giggles and footsteps followed, pouring down the stairs behind me, closer and closer, their excitement mounting. I needed an exit. I needed a way out before they caught up. Ahead, I saw a faint sliver of gray light leaking through the edges of another door. An exterior door, battered, but still standing. I lunged for it, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the storm outside. My fingers fumbled with the rusted latch. Behind me, the laughter stopped. Dead silence. I hesitated, just for a moment, terror squeezing my throat closed. And then something heavy thudded onto the stone floor behind me. A slow, deliberate scrape of feet dragging closer. I wrenched the door open, the hinges shrieking in protest, and stumbled out into the howling rain. Cold needles of water pelted my face, soaking me to the skin in seconds, but I didn't care. I ran. I ran down the overgrown hill, slipping and sliding in the mud, driven by a primal terror that gave my legs a strength I didn't know they had. The laughter hadn't returned, but somehow that was worse. The silence clung to me like a second skin, heavy and suffocating. I didn't dare look back, not until I reached the bottom of the hill, gasping, mud-smeared, shivering with cold and fear. Only then did I turn. The house loomed above me, crooked and black against the lightning-streaked sky. And there she was, in the highest window, standing perfectly still, framed by the flickering storm. The little girl, watching me, smiling. Her hollow eyes burned into mine, a promise that this wasn't over, that it would never be over. Even miles away, even safe inside my locked car, even years from now, I would never be free of her gaze. Never. I stumbled through the narrow corridor, slipping and sliding as the laughter echoed behind me. Closer now, too close. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was dozens, maybe more. A chaotic chorus of childish glee that filled the cramped space, bouncing off the stone walls, sinking into my skin. My lungs burned as I pushed myself forward, my hands scraping the rough brick whenever I lost my balance. Somewhere above me, doors slammed one after another. Bam! 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 As if the entire house was waking up, shaking itself loose from whatever nightmare it had been trapped in. I didn't dare look back. I knew if I did, if I even glanced over my shoulder, I'd see them. I'd see her. That impossible grinning face with hollow eyes that had already rooted itself into my brain. The corridor twisted sharply, and I nearly crashed into the wall, barely catching myself. My wet boots skidded on the slick floor as I rounded another corner, desperate for an exit. Any exit. My hand brushed against a heavy wooden door, and without thinking, I shoved it open and tumbled through. The air hit me like a slap. Cold, wild, alive with the scent of rain and earth. I was outside. The side of the house loomed to my left, broken and rotting, the shutters banging loosely in the storm. Beyond it, Raven Hill fell away into a wild, overgrown slope, slick with mud and brambles. I didn't hesitate. I ran. Behind me, the door slammed open again with a deafening crack, and the laughter spilled out into the night, chasing me down the hill. My feet slipped in the mud, and I went down hard, sliding a few feet before scrambling back to my hands and knees. I could hear them, tiny feet pattering against the stones, the brush of something scraping across the ground just behind me. Their excitement was a living thing now, shrieking and howling in triumph. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the sharp sting of rocks and thorns tearing at my hands, and sprinted into the night, half blind, half deaf from the storm raging around me. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the twisted black skeletons of dead trees, and for an instant, I saw them. Small figures darting through the rain, too fast, too many, their grinning faces turned toward me. I ran harder, lungs burning, legs screaming for rest, but I couldn't stop. If I stopped, they would catch me. If I stopped, it would all be over. The hill seemed endless, every step a battle against the sucking, treacherous mud. I slipped again, rolled down a few feet, crashing into a tangle of wet roots before clawing my way up, spitting out dirt and rain. The laughter behind me was louder now, almost joyful, as if they knew how close they were. Finally, mercifully, I saw the road. Or what was left of it. A strip of broken asphalt winding through the storm like a lifeline. My car was a distant, dark shape, half sunken in the mud. But it was there. It was real. It was salvation. I didn't think. I didn't feel. I just ran. When I finally reached the car, I wrenched the door open with frozen, trembling fingers and threw myself inside, slamming the door so hard the whole vehicle rocked. I jammed the key into the ignition and turned it, once, twice, praying, pleading. The engine coughed, stuttered, caught. The headlights flickered weakly to life, and in their pale beams, I saw the bottom of Raven Hill. It was empty. No figures, no children, no girl in a nightgown. Only the rain, pouring down in endless sheets, drenching the world in gray. I slammed the gear into reverse, tires spinning helplessly in the mud for a terrifying second before catching enough traction to jerk free. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I didn't even breathe properly until the house was a smudge in my rearview mirror, swallowed by the storm. Only when I reached the main road, solid, familiar asphalt under my tires, did I dare slow down. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the wheel. My body was racked with cold and exhaustion, and something deeper, something that clung to my very bones. And then, stupid, reckless, I looked back one more time. Far away, atop the craggy rise of Raven Hill, the house stood dark against the clouds. But in one of the upstairs windows, illuminated by a final flash of lightning, I saw her, the little girl, standing there, watching me, still smiling. And somehow, even through the rain, I knew she always would.